Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started. Welcome to the second session of Item Learning this semester. And today we're joined by two of my colleagues from KGI, Lindsay Jansen, who comes to the Intercollegiate Academic Computing Committee with me and the Sakai administration team, and her colleague Steve Casper. And we've been talking about iRubric in terms of how it connects with Sakai. And KGI has been using iRubric for a couple of years now. And so today they're going to talk about the results of their piloting iRubric. And I guess you guys are beyond piloting now, right?
We are using it. I think we're using it.
Okay, excellent. Well, let me turn it over to them. Thank you.
Okay, so again, my name's Steve. I'm the ALO at KGI, and she does all the real work. So we've been working, trying hard to get faculty to use rubrics in general to help with our assessment activities. And then we've taken the opportunity to start working with iRubric, which is a really good way to try to standardize some of our rubric use. And then what we're going to show you today is how to then think about using that to provide better assessment data. So what we're going to do is we've broken it into kind of two parts. First, Lindsay is going to talk about the broad integration of iRubric and Sakai and how we use it to create rubrics. Then I'll talk about how we use it to create assessment data, and we've got some preliminary results that we've been working on badly for the last few days, so we've got some real data to show you on how this is helping us to hopefully evaluate our progress in training and helping scientists learn how to write. One of our program learning outcomes is communication and writing. So we've got some data on that to share with you. So, Lindsay?
So I'm kind of underneath. But so right now, Pomona adds iRubric to, you guys have course sites, so we only use project sites. So it's a little bit different, but it should function the same way. And it's just occurring to me that I don't actually know what it looks like in a course site, if there's any difference. I imagine that there wouldn't be because the tool is the same. So it's used in the gradebook tool, and I know we've all seen this before. When you go into edit a gradebook item settings, you're going to see this icon here. This is the rubric icon. And then you select your own rubric. Once you select the rubric icon, you'll open up the iRubric tool, and then you see this taskbar. So when you want to build a rubric, you have a couple options. You can build from scratch. You can revise an existing rubric. You can duplicate and repurpose existing rubrics. So if there's an institutional rubric, we included one, an example of our written report rubric. You can adapt that. And then there's a public rubric gallery, and right now there are 310,000 rubrics to choose from, so there is no shortage. This is a couple different shots of the top area for what it looks like when you are in your rubric studio. And as you can see, there are numerous categories that really span across every area. So as far as general education, you can start from the bottom and go all the way to the top. And then there are different types, and that's the full list over there on the left. So when you're building a rubric, there are a couple advanced features that are really nice. One of which is you can break a rubric up into sections, and you can weight those sections by percentage. So if you have this is composition. If you wanted to make another section that was style or appearance or different presentation aspects, whatever different things, you can break it up and weight those accordingly. Likewise, you can weight all the different criteria levels, and you can do that by points or percentage. In your criteria or values here at the top, you can scale these points to whatever grading system you're using. So this is just your basic. I just put this together as a test. You have different levels, and you can go as far and as wide as you need to based on your assessment type. For grading, once your rubric is complete and you've added it to the gradebook item, when you go back into the gradebook, the rubric icon will appear next to each student. And to grade, for an individual student, you just click on that icon next to their name, and it'll take you into whatever rubric you use. So this is the top level for our written report rubric. And for this one, we had it weighted at a 16.6%. And what you do to grade is you just basically click on the box, whichever one you deserve. Now, these are connected to the point value here, but the point value can be changed manually. So if a student, if you click marginal, this will default to 2. But if you feel like they were really in between here, you can change this to a 3 or a 2.2 or whatever you think is the most appropriate and exact for the student, which is really nice.
All the time.
It's really nice to customize because what we see most of the time is that people are somewhere in the middle, even though it is a rubric. So this allows that, and it's served us really well. There are a couple different areas for feedback. One is the quick feedback, and this is next to every criteria, and you can just jot notes in here and the student will see those when you release the rubric. There's also a feedback plus option, which will open up this, a larger window, and in this window you can provide resources, you can add links, you can cut and paste text from their written assignments and go in, highlight different things, underline. So it can get as interactive as you want to make it in as much time as a faculty member or as someone in assessment as you have to give to grading. And then there's also private notes. And students cannot view the private notes. Other instructors who have grading privileges can go in and look at these and alter these. So if you need to communicate with another instructor, leave them a note. Or if you suspect a student of cheating, you can say, double check this for plagiarism or run through Turnitin, whatever the case may be. But everything you put there is completely private. So once grading is finished, and once a rubric is built, you can align it to standards. This is the basic standard page. This is one of the best things about iRubric for us, and we've been using it for our program reviews and accreditation. You can align a rubric to course outcomes, program outcomes, institutional, and accreditation. So the whole gamut. And iRubric has most regional accreditation and professional accreditation outcomes already programmed and in the tool. So that's not something that you have to add on your own. Although you could add if you had something that they didn't already have. And then when you're all said and done, and after you've aligned and after you've graded, you can report. You can report by rubric, or you can report by standard. If you want to access the raw data for any assignment, you can also do that and pull it out by a summary, which is what we did to create some of the stuff that Steve's going to show you. And these are the reporting visual options that you have, so chart status, CSV, just pretty traditional stuff, and then a screen for PDF. But it's nice because you can pull things out with the summary data. You can look at students by demographic or grade level or any criteria that you want to. So that is the quick run through and the highlights of what the tool looks like, and now we're going to go into how we used it.
All right. So again, I'm the accreditation liaison officer for QGI and professor over there. So we're really interested in integrating this type of data into our program review that leads into our institutional review. So right now we're running a program review of our largest program, the MDS program. So knowing this is coming up over the last year or two, we've tried very hard to work with faculty to integrate some of their assessment into not only rubrics, but rubrics using iRubric, and we're trying to pull out, again, standards linked to our program learning outcomes that are going from there. So I can't even see them. I always try to swing something from the slides. It's horrible, right? But so again, do you guys know a lot about assessment plans? You guys know this stuff pretty well? So just really briefly, so there's WASP. They can accredit us or choose not to, or they can make your life, they always accredit you, but they make your life more or less difficult during the time. So what we need to do is create an assessment plan which basically provides evidence that we use to occasion, or that any institution uses to gather data to kind of both help outsiders, inform outsiders, and help ourselves know that we're actually educating somebody in something. So we have a variety of program learning outcomes linked to each program, which are also linked to institutional learning outcomes. And those outcomes are linked to things that go on in courses. So we have an assessment plan to evaluate the extent to which learning has occurred for each of these PLOs. They collect both direct and indirect evidence of things like course grades and coursework, indirect evidence of things like attitudinal surveys. And one of the issues is just data availability for doing this. So what happens most of the time, and I've seen the KGI versions of these, is that you have hundreds of students, and how in the world am I going to get data for all of them? So you pick a few of them by some sample criteria, and you create portfolios of student learning. So I've seen the KGI ones from the last time we did this, and I was surprised that like the 4 very best students at KGI were being chosen for this. The rapid ones, and we look really good at the end. So there's a real bias for these types of issues. I mean, you're supposed to choose them before they start, but well, this one's from Stanford, though. That's good. Kind of thing, right? So I mean, I think, it's kind of poking fun at it, but most institutions do a lot better job than that. But you can see they're just going to be inherently biased because it's a small sample of your actual population, and there is no statistical sampling procedure that I'm aware of that's used to create these things. So it creates selection bias, and you have incomplete data. So the great thing about iRubric from the kind of assessment point of view is that if you can integrate iRubric into your grading things and get professors to use rubrics that are somewhat standardized and tied to these program learning outcomes, you can use that to get data on all your students, which is a whole lot better than a few of your students, right? So you go from having too little data to what I found the last couple of days working with this to too much data. But I'd much rather have the too much data problem, right? It's much better. So you can get data for every student in the program. It removes the bias element, and it might allow more sophisticated methods of student learning. I'm not going to show you anything really sophisticated today, but we can get our statistics people in and things like that and really have a shot at this data. Adoption issues are key. Sorry about the formatting of this one. The thing that's interesting, though, is that you have to get faculty to use pretty much the same rubric for the same type of assessment. So we found that there are certain things that are fairly easy to do that for, and other things that are harder. So we have a program learning outcome based on focused around communication, and there are 3 kind of subsets to that: teamwork, written communication, and speaking public communication. For that area, it's fairly standard. So we've developed rubrics for each of those areas, and I think, Lindsay, we've had a pretty good, we've had success in getting faculty fairly universally to use those for those assignments. And some of the data I'm going to show you today is from writing from that. Other elements of our assessment plan have to do with more substantive learning, in particular science areas or business areas or ethics. That, I think, is going to be more difficult. We're also trying to implement the information literacy rubric that was just passed from the library. We're trying to integrate that into our assessment plan right now. That would be another fairly standardized rubric that we might be able to use. But more or less, faculty, they have to use the same rubric. There are grading standards that can actually change within that, what the points are. Technically, you can even change the boxes a little bit, but the standards need to be the same. You want the actual criteria to be fairly similar as well. Okay, so again, this is a little bit about our students. We have students that are all scientists. It's a graduate program for the most part right now. They're all scientists. They come to us with an undergraduate science degree. About 35% of our students are international students. So you put those together, that creates a lot of communication writing challenges at KGI. Science students, especially from the big UCs, they sit in lectures with 300 people trying to compete to get into medical school most of the time, or whatever they're doing. And they don't do a ton of writing. I can say that the students that come from science programs at liberal arts colleges, I should say, science programs from the liberal arts colleges, so this would be the best example around here. But we've had students from throughout the Claremont colleges and also many other liberal arts colleges. They do a lot better in this. Big university science students and then international students where English, of course, isn't their first language, have tremendous difficulties with our communication standards at KGI. And it turns out this is really important because most of our students don't want to actually do science and industry. They want to apply their science and do project management or marketing or some business thing. And in all those areas, communication is just crucial. So one of the things we've been focusing on a lot over the years is to integrate within our science and business classes a lot of communication and writing. That's been, I think, easiest with verbal communication and teamwork. It's been hardest with writing just because it's hard to teach, hard to grade, and hard for our students. So that's what's been going on there. So with iRubric, starting last year, we started using iRubric, and about a year before that, we introduced a standardized rubric, which I think we passed around. So you can look at the written version of that. It's not going to be a big part of this talk, but the written version that's got in iRubric is there. So we managed to get that to be used in quite a number of assignments. So right now we have data for an initial writing assessment. What we do is, we have a very protracted 2-week orientation thing at KGI. We're really into orientation. We're going to rename it the academic prologue. We've decided the first week of that is the prologue to make it serious. And as part of the prologue, they do a team project and they do an initial writing assessment. We use that to bucket students into groups of students based on their writing abilities. The ones that are in the poorest group get writing help. And then all these students do a professional development class that does emphasize writing. And then there are a number of courses, especially in the first semester, that have writing assignments. So there's individual writing assignment. There's this course here. I actually teach this. So there are 5 memo assessments in this class. And then there's a medical diagnostics class. So we've got data over those 7 things, although it turned out we lost some of this data on ALS 320, so you can blame, I guess.
It was a Sakai issue.
Sakai
it was a
issue.
Sakai accident.
So I'm mad about that. So we have 6 data points for a lot of this and 7 at the macro level. And then for this same class that started last year, we have 2 writing assignments this fall that are going on right now, actually. Everybody is doing this Team Masters project, individual writing, and about 75% of students are doing this elective course 1 here. So we'll have at the end about 8 samples over a bit over a year to judge their writing. So I'm going to show you a bunch of the data now. And again, the key learning I've learned about this, I started working, we did some work on this about 6 months ago. I'll show you our very first slide. And then I decided, Lindsay and I decided, I should say that, what we really need to do is go back to the raw data and kind of format it better. So I've been messing with that ever since, and I'll show you what we've got so far. So this is our very first attempt to use iRubric data. So what you have here at the bottom are a bunch of writing assignments. So these initial assignment, and these are laid out sequentially when they had. And then you have basically different criteria that they've met. Exemplary exceeds, meets below, and well below. And you just see the distribution in every one of these things. If you look at it really carefully, you can see some differences, but this wasn't the most spectacular output I think we've ever come out with, because it's just really hard to see what's going on. You can see the number of people in exceeds has gone up quite a bit by there, it's gone up. The number of people that are below or well below has gone down a bit, but it's really hard to see it turned out or not. So this is why we went back to the original data, and I've got a little bit better data on this, but not dramatically better. What we started to do is that this also combines all 6 standards in that rubric, and we decided to just aggregate and look at standards one by one, and we started using line graphs rather than bar graphs, so you'll see this in a sec. So, yeah.
Just, it looks like exemplary starts out high, goes low, and then comes back up.
Yeah.
Is that just that some assignments are tougher than others?
Well, I'm going to get to this at the end. So the issue with the initial writing assignment is there's no grade attached to that.
No, I'm just saying 1, 2
Yeah.
are much higher than 3, much higher than industry review, and then it comes back up with 4 and 5.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
was 3 a particularly hard assignment?
That was the first one that had data in it. I think
First
that's
one
part of
numbers.
it. First one of numbers.
Yes.
So that's one issue. So numbers are involved. The other issue with that first assignment is that it's not graded. And it's because of that, when you start getting these really low numbers on a rubric and iRubric, and it counts for your grade, you'll get students in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And unless they really are god-awful, you're really going to avoid that. So there's a tendency to give them satisfactory with a comment that this is actually not that satisfactory, just to keep their grades up.
And there's a
Because
professor
that would
who
still be a C, which is a failing grade at KGI. So at KGI, a failing grade is below 80. So if you start giving out 40s and 50s, it really impacts their ability to pass the class. And it's just, it's telling them you suck. It's really, really a bad load. So we tended to give up a lot of 60s and 70s. And I think that impacted some of these results, which I'll show you some more of. So this is we looked at 2 of them in more data with more nuance. We looked at 2 of the 6 standards, grammar and style, and organization and thought progression. So this is organization and thought progression. And I thought this was a pretty good result here. What you see is that good went from about 40% to about 80%. over this time period. So that was, they went from, not that good to good. The number of outstandings just kind of went down a little bit, or it's plateaued. A lot of that, again, is just differences in these assignments. A lot of those are actually graded by me, and I don't get a lot of outstandings, but they're and so forth. But I actually think this right here is better than anything we've ever seen with the portfolio method for writing. One of the things we're interested in looking at is there a point of time where we've taught enough writing where we can just reinforce and consolidate? We do right now a lot of fairly intensive writing in the first semester. They have these assignments, there's a lot of them. They're all in the first semester, and for a science program, it's a lot of writing. Should we do more? Should we do less? We're trying to figure out from this data when is enough and for who, and so forth. So that's one finding. This one, though, is the grammar and style, which I found a bit harder to evaluate, basically. So it's the same sort of thing, but a lot of them were in the good and outstanding range. There's a decline in the lower ones, which we found good, but that's what we got there. So that's that. Simplified further, then I started thinking, there are just too many lines here, so let's have fewer lines. So this one right here consolidates outstanding and good and marginal and poor. So you just have three. You have people that are, B's and A's. You have the C range and you have the failing range, basically, as three different ranges. And again, this is for, I didn't put N up here because I should have, but this is about 100 students doing these things. So it's a pretty good, about 90 students doing these assignments. So it's a pretty good in here. But what you see is these right here are all basically the same course, so that there's a big variation in the grading style in that initial writing project from these other memo assignments, and that I think impacts these a little bit. Okay, so then what we did, so this is everybody. So I think this is the first attempt at the more nuanced analysis, and literally some of this is 2 hours old. I was working on it this morning trying to get this stuff to work better. So what we decided to do is, instead of looking at everybody, we look at the people that did most poorly on the initial writing assignment and see if we help them compared to everybody else. Those tend to be, it's just there's a real sample, there's just a real clustering. A lot of international students are there. There are a few Americans there, but a lot of international students. I think if we go and get sophisticated and have a month off, everything else in life to work on this, I would do some other ways. I would go and get the GRE verbal scores and use that as the indicator, or perhaps international and domestic. I don't like really creating those biases, but I think the GRE verbal might be a really good one. One issue with that initial writing assessment is that you had to do a pre-reading and show up, and also it was a time thing. You had 2 hours to do it. So if you're not a fast writer and you didn't read the thing, you're going to fail that thing. So I looked through it today, and there were 5 or 6 A students that failed that thing that did really well afterwards. So I didn't take those people out of the data, but I do think there's an issue there in terms of what their starting point is. So I'm going to show you some of this data, then I'm going to finish up. So this is organization and thought, all students together. And you see a pretty similar thing. I actually showed you part of this already, right? You see, the top part is good and excellent. Again, the bottom is failing and that's satisfactory. Her is just the bottom 1/3. So this is everybody, and this is the bottom 1/3. So again, there's poor, marginal, satisfactory, and good. So it's hard to really see a massive difference here. One of the things I noticed is that a lot of the differentiating in the grades is actually from good and outstanding. And what I kind of learned after this is that what I think our writing program is doing is turning C writers into B writers, and B writers, or A writers keep to be A writers, and a lot of B writers becoming A writers. In terms of how we grade, they're grading to that. So,
Can I ask for clarification?
say it again?
Can I just ask for clarification?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I must be missing something. So you have that many students who are getting good and outstanding. 30% of your bottom third of the class is getting a good or outstanding on their initial assessment?
You said some of these people blew off the assignment.
Yeah. So 30%.
So how did you determine who was good and outstanding and who was...
It was all based on a rubric. So this is all rubric grading. So all I did was, it generates a score. So the next one, I actually took everybody below 70. This one, I took the bottom 30 out of 100 people that took it.
Okay, and so the way that you determine the quartiles or the thirds is distinct from the rubric. Is that?
Yes.
Is that okay?
So the rubric, it's derived from the rubric in a different way. So going back to what Lindsay said, each of those little criteria, and they're not criteria, each of these grade levels basically, poor, marginal, satisfactory, had a point assigned to it from 1 to 5, and every one was worth, at this point I think it was very simple, it was just 20% of the grade, or 1/5 or 1/6 of the grade. So you get a grade suggestion at the end, but the professors that graded it weren't told they were doing a grade, they were just told to click the boxes, and that's it. But I did have the grades, and they ranged from literally like 40 out of 100 all the way up to 100. So in this case, I took the bottom third of the aggregate grade across all standards, and then I've taken 2 of those standards that seemed most representative to writing. So some of the other cited standards are referencing, analysis, content, and things like that. I just took the 2 that were writing-centric, which are organization structure and grammar style. So some of these students here did very good. So even though their grade was below, in all cases below 70, 30% of them happened to do very good on this standard. All right? They messed up something else. They wrote beautifully, but it was vacuous, or something like that, right? Or
They
they
didn't cite their sources.
they didn't cite their sources or whatever, right? So that's why there is a little bit of independence, but not a lot. So it's an aggregate grade determined who was in this pool, and then from this pool, furthers their classification across these different criteria. I don't know if you're saying criteria, they're not criteria. Across the. Does that make a little sense? On this, okay. So you see here that the good. So this time the difference is good and outstanding are together. So I changed that up. So here is the second attempt. So this one's what I did just this morning. I took all the students this time with 70%. I also just took students in our MBS program. This one had a lot of students. We have 3 programs. We have our pre-medical certificate that has about 25 students per year. The MBS program has about 50 to 60. And then we have a PPM program, which is for PhDs that just do our business program. It turned out quite a few of those PPM program students bombed this because they blew it off or whatever. And then they got real serious about writing when it was graded and did really well. So I dropped those students out and just focused on MBS, mainly because that's our program review is on MBS. So this is just the MBS bottom 1/3. And again, you see an organizational style progression.
Is it the next one?
Yes, the next one, I'm sorry. This is grammar and style on this one, and you can see what you see here. And I thought this was hard to figure out what was going on. But you see the poor satisfactory definitely going down, but it did plateau and go down. You saw the good going up, and the outstanding, once they got to the memo 1, which was all the same classes, pretty similar, basically. So this one here, this is less than 70, hers greater than 70, so this is the rest of the class. And here's what you got there. So you see differences here for sure. The poor, marginal, satisfactory, there are less of them, although they did decline by the end. The number that ended up being outstanding was far less. So when I was saying, I think what you get out of this is more analysis, which we need to do, is that our program, some of them, like 10%, aren't getting help that much at all, actually. They need a lot of help. The students that were like kind of getting C's in the beginning, now they're getting B's. And then everybody else, some of them are remaining where they were at the beginning. They were decent writers, they hadn't put a lot into it, but they were getting a B and they're happy. They might be science students, don't care about the business classes or the writing. And then a lot of them are going from B type good to outstanding, which would be an A grade. Hers, another comparison where I just put them together. So I had too many lines on this. So I just put the bottom to the top, right? So I've got the outstanding for both groups and the weak, or the poor marginal for both groups, right? So the ones that have weak are the bottom, whatever it was, less than 70%. So that would be the red and the purple line. The blue and the green are the ones that are doing well. So again, needs a lot further analysis for sure, but this is what you can do with this type of data. And this is not hours, it's hours of work. So this is what you can do with hours of work in this. I think if you put in weeks of work, you can come up with something tremendous from this. And when it gets real serious time for us, i.e. WASP comes walking up the door, we'll get real serious about this. But what we're going to try to do is add more reference points to this. We have 2 more assignments for this same reference group we're doing this semester, so it'll be over 3 semesters rather than 1 semester. And then ideally, you want to try to understand what points from this are actionable. So for example, we provide writing resources to the bottom students. Are we doing that effectively, for example? are we providing, too much writing? I don't think there's going to be too much writing, honestly, but are we providing, our professors do, because they have to grade all this stuff, so are we providing too much writing for some of these students? But then, pedagogically, it's really hard to tell half the class, you're a good writer, so you can do something else, and the poor writers need to write more. So there are hopefully closing the loop, that's the big WASP term, is closing the loop. Closing loop type implications that come out of this, and again, we're going to do more analysis. So to conclude, I think the Sakai iRubric integration has really helped diffuse the use of rubrics among our faculty. I think Lindsay can attest to that because she's being tested all the time. Can you help me set up iRubric, which is what we really want. And the faculty seem pretty responsive to the idea of developing more rubrics and using them. I mean, for sure, we didn't talk about this today, but as a side point, one thing that's great about using iRubrics and rubrics in general is that I think grading tends to be a little bit fairer. Those assessments I was showing, those memo assessments, I had a TA, a graduate TA in my class. I graded half of each memo, and then we switched each time, and I did histograms of the grades, and they were exactly the same using these rubrics. So rubrics is a really good way to grade in terms of fairness, and then you get this really cool assessment data. I think using it for other program learning outcomes, i.e., did you learn something about biology in this class, is going to be more challenging. But especially for these communication type things, really good tool to use. So that's, I think, all we have to say. Do you want to say anything else, Lindsay?
You mentioned just TAs can grade, which is a huge plus.
Yeah.
Anything to say about that?
It creates more consistent stuff, and it's faster. I can tell one thing I'll say is, this writing assignment's the man of my life, because I have students complaining all the time about grades. The number of complaints I get on grades, I've gotten one this year so far. I've graded 3 of these things.
This is after students see a rubric before an assignment, so they know the expectations going in, and then when you come back and say, well, this is exactly what was in your text, there's less
and the comments
space
tend to be more targeted, and they tend to be more accurate. So we're pretty big fans of this. I mean, so, we were just talking at the lunch part about the debate about what course management program to use, and I mean, I have nothing against Sakai or anything else, but I got to tell you, this iRubric integration to Sakai has really helped us at KGI a lot, and that's something we want to look for going forward. Do you guys have any other questions?
Yeah. Do you do these analysis in Excel or in iRubric?
Yeah, I use Excel for all of this. So Lindsay, who's the tech guru.
So the first slide that you saw, which was our first go around, we put that together for a Board of Trustees report, and I only use the iRubric table. So, but for everything else, it's just we pulled the data out, the raw data, the summary data. This wasn't a report run by rubric or by standard. We pulled these out by assignment, which were all the same rubric, and put them together in Excel.
Yeah, so I didn't think this. There are still, these board people, all our board is industry people, so you have to do more accreditation this period. So, but I thought this was pretty hard to look at.
So,
Go ahead.
yeah. So does iRubric have any sort of tools help you analyze the data? It's just export the raw data?
Yeah, not that I'm familiar with. I mean, with all these other tools, every other one of them is just me playing around with the data. So that's one thing I would say is, there might be tools I don't know of, but I do Excel work for my research all the time. So for me, once I got going on it, I probably spent 4 hours generating all this data for you guys. And for me, it's worth it because I can show to the faculty, we can do analysis of it, and it'll really help with our program review of this program right now. And we're throwing resources at writing all the time, and there's never been any analysis whatsoever of what works, what doesn't work, except for, Cindy's doing better this year or whatever, right? So I think it's going to help us from that point of view. But I didn't see any tools outside of this one. You can do this kind of stuff. The other thing I didn't like about this is it threw all the standards together. And I really think disaggregating the standards makes a lot of sense in this. So for example, these writing ones, one of the standards has to do with content, and we would like to use that data for a different program learning outcome on, did they learn anything about business in this course?
But for this report, because the rubrics are aligned with the standards in such a way that everything related to this outcome specifically, it only pulls out those criteria from the rubrics that you're using. So this actually doesn't have the content. This only has, because it's an outcome report based on a standard rather than a rubric, it only has those criteria that are aligned with that standard.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming the faculty culture at KGI is slightly more command and control than it is at the Liberal Arts College. So my question is, how did you come up with these standards, and how do you get faculty to use rubrics? We talk about rubrics, and faculty said, well, it's a holistic thing. I can't separate the content from the grammar.
So here's a faculty member here.
Well, I just observe, I don't think it's command and control. I think the fact that there's 15 faculty.
That's a small
Yeah, that Steve can wander down the hall and say, come on, Joel, why don't you just give this a try? When I was in a department of 35, in a school of 100, in a university of thousands of faculty, we never had that level of diffusion and accountability and similarity in our approaches. But with 15 faculty, it's much easier to get us on the same
That's one
page.
reason it works for us. There's, what's the assessment culture on your campus is one of the first questions. Is it something that's embedded? Is it something, the word rubric is common, for faculty in different disciplines, those types of questions. And once you have some of those answers, then you will know if this approach is feasible or not at all. And it may not be, depending on the faculty group in reality.
I wish they called them grading aids.
Well, and they really are. And when we approached this, I think 2 years ago, that was one of our big points of emphasis, was this will assist you. In the grading, you can collapse some of those boxes, and it's just a grid, and you can just click, 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 click. I mean, and the rate at which you can move through material is much quicker and can be much more efficient with some of the comment tools and different things. So
I went from a three-prong thing. I used to have these memos, so 3 or 4 pages. I would just write on the bottom and give them a grade. And then I would use the rubric and check it off manually and write on the bottom. And now I use this. And it's I wouldn't say it's all that faster, but the amount of data the students get from you is superior. And it's consistent. But, I think the thing that's worked at KGI for us is I've been at KGI 11 years now, and I only started using rubrics the last 3 or 4, and they've been part of our culture since year 1 because WASP wants you to use them. So really, rubrics became popular when the faculty, several faculty started owning assessment at KGI rather than being an administrator. So I'm probably the worst ALO in the Carmen colleges because I know that I can tell you one CFR of my gun list that they have in my head. But the thing we can do is work with faculty. And because it's not an administrator telling a faculty person to use a rubric, it's a bunch of faculty that can talk about their classes. It's really helped a lot. So I think we started with 3 or 4 faculty using it for these writing things. Then we started using it for our presentation and teamwork things, which is more diffuse. We're going to use the information literacy rubric next. And then the next step is I want everything that's not a multiple choice test or a written math answer where there's a right or wrong to be rubric graded, because I just think it provides better data. I think it's up to grabs of whether we'll be able to align these rubrics so every faculty is using the same one, because once you get outside of topics like this, I think there's a lot more customization in the assessment. But I do think this will help us tremendously in terms of just understanding if students are learning anything, creating consistent outcomes. And I'm all into the holistic, all this stuff too, but I do think faculty and students both benefit from this sort of world.
So what's the percentage of faculty using it?
This rubric here, we have, well, right now, I mean, we've targeted everybody that has a major writing assignment to use it. So I would say about 5 systematically. Right now on that Team Masters project, there are 23 faculty working on it, we have adjuncts working on it. And we're trying to get everybody to use that for grading an assignment right now. So that would be almost everybody. We presented this at faculty meetings 2 or 3 times. It's usually a snowball type effect, though, I would say. It's hard. I mean, right now, we're at the established School of Applied Life Sciences, but KGI is running this pharmacy school, and they're hiring 20 faculty right now. They're incorporating all of this from the ground up. And a lot of that is professional accreditation, which we don't have. So another way to do it is, like if you're starting a new program or a new degree, which doesn't happen very often around here, I know, you can kind of make it part of the DNA of that program, and that's another approach.
So what's the general reaction from the faculty? Do they kind of not complain about the difficulty of using it, or they kind of like it, they find it easy to use it?
What's your response? Nancy, she works with faculty every day.
My experience is that the first question is, can I adapt it? How can I change it to be more specifically tailored to my assignment? I walked you through all the different weightings, so they can change all of those numbers as long as our general criteria is the same. They can add, columns of criteria, and they can change some of the language within those different, within the scales of,
So like on the
ranking.
content one, the content can be, they can add material for whatever that class is about.
Right, exactly.
As long as it's still a content that has basically a similar graduation.
So that's what we allow them to do, which is helpful. And then on my side, as sort of the administrator for this, I can go into their rubrics and pull the data out and align their rubrics with our institutional standards. So it's still usable, even though they're modified.
And by the way, we don't tell faculty to do anything.
No, they get to choose.
We suggest and incentivize. One thing you might think about, this is a different program, but I know across the common colleges, there's an emphasis on kind of flipping the classroom using concept videos. We've got a massive adoption of concept videos because we got a grant, and we're just using the grant to pay the faculty to make them. So that's another strategy, is we're paying literally $500 a complete concept video with an assessment integrated into the class. I've got one that came last week and said, yeah, Steve, I just did 8 of them. I want to go to Hawaii. And, we have a grant of $60,000 to do this stuff. So there are different incentive systems, and that's a fairly unique one. We have this grant, and I talked to Dean into, how are we going to use it? Why don't we just see if we can get 100 concept videos, which would really be a big push for us. And, I think the trail of Crumb approach probably wouldn't get us to that goal, kind of just paying them, in this case, did. And that's the only time we've ever done that at KGI, and I don't think that's going to happen again, but it worked for sure.
We didn't really incentivize with this other than, it'll enhance efficiency and accuracy for grading, which are huge things, and faculty time is valuable. But once faculty did begin using it, the ones who did immediately when we sort of piloted, we just chose a few and reached out to a few faculty and sort of, asked them to adopt. Once they did, they really ran with it. And they're using it in all of their courses now, so.
Could it be used for student graders? Is the security such that
You have to, well, you can answer this.
You have to have access to the
It
grade.
depends on your,
That's probably a no-no.
it depends on the credentials given in Sakai.
Yeah.
So it's based on that. A student or an instructor or a TA will be able to have the same access based on their type of account in iRubric. So the tool adapts to the basis set through the Sakai credential.
So can I ask, what that would require then is getting student graders access to the gradebook function.
Yes.
Does
Yes.
this automatically deposit that information into the gradebook
Yes.
function so it's like giving students access to other people's grades?
So it generates a grade, and it generates the feedback that the students get when you release the grades. And then whatever the grade is, 88, shows up in the grade box. And you can change that grade again if you want. But in the beginning, it's aligned. And then I always try to make the grade box grade exactly the same as what they see in Sakai. But very often, I go in and tinker these little grades incessantly because I want a 91. And I'm getting an 88, so I'll change that to 4.8 or whatever, and that works a lot. So the students will be able to do that.
And it depends on their role as a grader. If it's a student grader who's also enrolled in the class and they're just grading some of the class, then that's a conflict of interest. But if it's a TA or if it's some other position where they're not in the class,
That's
then,
what it would be.
yeah, then they're
You still
usually
can't have access to the gradebook.
we give
Must
them
be only
access
use the gradebook.
Yeah.
to the gradebook.
This gives.
I have 2 TAs right now, and I teach in 2 classes. Both of them have a TA that have access to it. The other thing we've done, we don't like to say this, but in the beginning, for some things, you're traveling off campus to see a presentation. We'll use paper rubrics, and I'll have one of our beleaguered administrative assistants type them into Sakai for me, into our rubric. And they won't be giving the comments, they will just be clicking the boxes.
Just
Transferring. I mean, that's not the way to go, but if you want to crawl before you walk, that works.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we would be able to use it for peer review, but classes where you have a student who is not in the class,
Yeah, but in
hired
math,
as
yeah.
a TA, they certainly already have access to it.
Well, they don't, unless you only are putting homework grades, like no exam grades in the gradebook function. Do you see what I mean? So student graders have access to homework grades because they're giving homework grades. But they don't have, they absolutely, under no circumstances, would have access to the entire array of course grades in that course.
Yeah, wild and crazy KGI.
So you almost want to be able to have them give grades, write-only grades. They can write their grades, and they can't read any other grades.
And is that possible in this?
Sounds like that's more of a supply
That's
question.
a gradebook
Right.
tool
Yeah.
function that wouldn't. I revert. Yeah, might be
I'm not
okay.
sure. I'm pretty sure you can set different permissions for specific graders.
Right.
I have to look at that.
Yeah, I have to go back and look at those credentials too. But the way that we've given our TAs, they sign FERPA agreements. They go through the ringer, and we trust them to be professional
And they're also
and not
PhD
go in
students.
areas they're not supposed to be in. So, and they're also PhD students.
So that probably would be the way to get traction here. Start out using it for student graded homework.
Trying a little bit in gradebook 2, the new in 2.8, gradebook 2, not gradebook. That one, once you assign TA, the TA role can do the same thing. They can
Oh, okay.
enter the grade, they can, modify grades.
Right. So that might be the answer to your concern. We're going to test, do some testing in that area.
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, I was just wondering, how easy is it to pull out like an individual student rubric scores for low class compared to the products and other class? Because what you're showing is kind of aggregate.
You just go into the tool, into their grade, and you can download it individually or print it, and then you just pull side by
So you
side.
can pull it out for individual students.
Yep.
Yeah, the easiest, so I just downloaded the whole data set, and then it was just fun with Excel to
Well,
pull
faculty
stuff out,
wouldn't
but-
be able to do that because they don't have access to other people's courses. But
Yeah.
depending on the circumstances of the request or different things, then any administrator or assessment person with the right credentials can do that.
So right now, when people get an academic, we have a pretty strict academic probation culture. You have to be above 3.0 to be kind of KPI if you don't maintain that grade point average after a couple semesters. So right now, we have these meetings all the time about what should we do with this student, and we're hoping that this finer grained detail, rather than just your grades, might help with that a little bit. So that's a scenario where I can see administrators or academic leaders at KGI who are being a student that person wanting to get that data and
We
sit
have
down.
academic communication, so certain points of contention like this have been data instruments for that type of group.
And the nice thing about it is when I just graded the things and gave them back, I had the grade, but those comments are gone forever. So the nice thing about this is I've got the comments forever if I want them.
Right, that's nice.
And I think that's really use, especially when students get in trouble later on. You can try to see the context a little bit where they flakes from day one. If we have one student that's just a total flake, but he's like Hemingway, the writer. And, it's just you try to put it in context a little bit more. This guy's the best writer we've ever had for a B student. And there you go.
So you said Pomona loads it on. They only do that for you guys, right? You're the only ones buying it?
I think that we're the only ones using it right now. If it became consortial-wide or if whoever wanted to adopt it did, then Pomona would do the same thing for them. Yeah. Free of charge.
And again, we're working.
Well, not technically.
We're trying to get a whole lot more of this stuff done by May, so we're working on this a lot this year. So, we're always trying to shore up our lousy reputation within the pharmacologists. So we're more than happy to come by and, make a presentation to faculty at some point or whatever to help. I mean, the one thing we're by is that I don't think we have any skin in the game of what course management program we use, but if we were going to switch to another course management thing that didn't have this integration, it would really be pretty lousy for us. Because we would have to come up with some other solution for this kind of stuff. And it's really, I've gone over some of this stuff with our WASP people, and they love this stuff. It's a real plus on the accreditation. And I think from the point of view of assembling data that right now only has to be assembled every 7 to 10 years, it's going to make life a whole lot easier, a whole lot easier. So we want to keep up doing this for sure. So that's one thing we're worried about with that debate.
Well, CGU's deadline for Canvas comes in a couple of weeks. So.
Yeah.
And the academic deans aren't moving fast enough to get on that bus, so I think you're safe for a while.
Yeah, and again, it's not like we have they just really like using this tool, so that's not an issue. Yeah, but again, we'd be happy to come by and talk again sometime. And thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much.